Thank you, Tim. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Pam Ford tōku ingoa. I'm the Director of Economic Development at Tātaki Auckland Unlimited, which is the region's economic and cultural agency. So it gives me great pleasure to moderate this panel. I think it's a penultimate session for the day before the wrap-up from Simon and Fran. And the panel will discuss the idea of New Zealand, and I'll say Auckland, being the hub between China or wider Asia and Latin America. So what is this idea, variously called the Southern Link or the Southern Cross? How would this connection benefit trade and tourism, and what considerations are necessary to make it happen? And we'll also get our panellists' views on what the opening of the New Zealand International Convention Centre will mean and what they are doing to leverage this game changer for our business event sector. So a very warm welcome to our panel here today. Fran, yet again, you've compiled and brought together some of the smartest people in the international trade, tourism and China relations space. I'll just quickly introduce each of our panel members. I'm sure you will know all of them. But here at the end, we've got Lisa Lee, Chief Executive of China Travel Service, the New Zealand branch of the CTS network, with a fine reputation for handling Chinese travellers since 1928. You haven't been doing it that long, have you, Lisa? Almost 100 years. So Lisa is very well known to everyone. Welcome, Lisa. Next to Lisa is Carrie Hurihanganui, Chief Executive of the publicly listed Auckland Airport. Prior to this role, Carrie held senior exec roles at Air New Zealand. She has a deep experience of the aviation industry, trade, travel and tourism. Next to Carrie is Alistair Crozier, the Executive Director of the New Zealand China Council, New Zealand-funded organisation which acts as a cross-sector peak body for the New Zealand-China relationship, established in 2012, not 1912. And last but not least, Les Morgan, Chief Operating Officer of Hind Management, who build, operate and manage high-performing hotel and commercial accommodation businesses, including the Sudima hotel brand, and a regular recipient of 5-Star Employer of Choice Awards. Welcome to you all. Warm welcome to our panel. So the Southern Link idea has been circling for well over a decade. It's been the long-standing ambition of leaders and has recently received renewed attention from the Mayor of Auckland, Wayne Brown, and hello to our wonderful Mayor, Wayne Brown. Trade between China and Southern with Brazil is apparently $480 billion, so imagine Auckland or New Zealand getting a piece of that action by using our geographic advantage. So let's open with you, Alistair, to give us a brief explanation of the Southern Link, given it was New Zealand China Council who commissioned a NZIER report, I think came out in 2021. Maybe you could explain a bit, what is it, what is the value, and what does it mean for China, New Zealand and South American trade?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Kia ora koutou. Yeah, so the title of the discussion is Time for a China Hub, but this is actually about a New Zealand hub. And it's not just links to China, it's really linking Asia and Latin America as two continents, with New Zealand as the midpoint. So rather than thinking of New Zealand as the lonely last station on the line, this is the concept that we can be an essential air connectivity hub between the two continents. So if you draw lines on a map, depending on which lines you draw, the route from parts of Asia into Latin America is the shortest and therefore the cheapest and the quickest and the greenest, which is an increasingly important thing between the two. But it's not just about distance, it's our generous landing rights, it's a convenient time zone, ease of doing business between the two continents, and less congestion. You might think it's all about passengers, spending time in the International Transit Lounge at Carrie's place and then moving on, but actually the report that we commissioned from NZIER in 2021 said it was more, the potential opportunity for New Zealand was more around e-commerce and New Zealand acting as a distribution or a fulfillment centre between the two continents, and even branching out to Australia and the Pacific Islands as well. So that's all good, great for those two continents, but what's in it for New Zealand? The report that we published said, firstly, when you do this, you start to cement air connectivity for our country, and that can be used by our exporters and importers as well. And if, heaven forbid, we have another shock, as we did a few years ago, the idea is that we're less disposable, we're less likely to be left off schedules if it's essential for cargo owners to continue using us. But of course, there's also the people as well, the tourists coming in from all directions, and the students and the business people. And lastly, there's employment and commercial opportunities in the hub itself as well. So that's the elevator pitch.
Thanks, Alistair. We'll come back to the e-commerce, but let's just pick up on the tourism angle, and I'll throw to Lisa. Lisa, you know, Chinese tourism is resurging, and you might have the numbers of where we're back to, and certainly we'll come to Carrie soon around the airport travel industry and how that's resurged. What do you see as the benefits of this idea of a southern link as a stopover for air travellers, and particularly in your business around incentive travel and business travel and recreation travellers?
Kia ora, everyone. In particular to my industry peers, headed by Renee, our Chief Executive of Tourism New Zealand. And thank you for including me in this panel. And first, I really want to say congratulations for this 10 years anniversary to Fran and Simon. Well done. And this Southern Link actually makes quite very big sense to the tourism industry. And just like what Alistair shared, and we actually won't be, because of the Southern Link, we won't be not anymore on the end of the value chain, but we're actually on the middle. And so that's what that means to tourism. We actually are able to bring the additional traffic for those people rather than just the inbound, because we talk about the inbound to New Zealand, outbound to China or to Asian countries. But now we actually bring the people to go to the South America, but transfer in New Zealand. And which also, because it's faster, is also actually make those sense, especially as after COVID, the people are so environmental friendly, you know, the sensible. So it is a really better choice for them. And also this, for the people to travel to South America, again, is actually tended to be the upper market. So it will be the premium travelers as well as the business travelers. We see the tremendous business travelers interested to South America. So that will be bring those business travelers to New Zealand and transform here to South America. And when you mentioned about the upcoming our conference center, and I believe that to Auckland, that will be make a lot of sense for us to have that business and also the meetings, incentive people, because we just signed that Auckland and airport, Tātaki Auckland, and also the China Southern Airlines just signed that tripartite agreement, which will be focused on and to build Auckland as a destination for business travelers, for meetings and incentive travelers. I think that Southern Link will be absolutely make sense and helpful on that.
Thanks, Lisa. We're going to get shortly to, you know, how do we make this happen? A lot of talky, what's the doey around something like this idea. But Les, what's your thoughts about this Southern Link idea? Would it work for Hind management?
Oh, any economic activity leads to visitation, and I think that's the key part. The opportunity to activate Auckland, but the whole of New Zealand in terms of having any business here will lead to tourism, and so we'll all benefit from that. And I think that's often overlooked. People often assume that a tourist is a person who rides on a bus, but a tourist is here for all sorts of reasons, cultural reasons, sporting reasons, business reasons, events reasons. So all those things will lead to demand, so it can only be a positive.
Great. Well, it all comes down to airports, really, doesn't it? And Carrie, over to you. I can think of no better airport than Auckland to be as a hub for the rest of the world, but how about being a hub for Asia through to Latin America? How does that sit with you? What are your thoughts?
Well, kia ora koutou, everyone. Fabulous to be here, and I might start with just some numbers. Data is always key from my perspective. So if you start with China, we currently have 6 airlines flying to 7 destinations. That's 1 airline and 2 destinations more than were being flown before the pandemic. This next summer season, capacity to China will be at 115% of pre-COVID, so very strong growth coming through that front, which is positive. Also connections back to South America and connections through to Santiago, to Auckland, and then ultimately through to Sydney. So you've got the makings of those. Another piece to think about will be the view that 80% of freight that arrives to New Zealand arrives in the belly hold of a passenger aircraft, and 90% of that 80% comes in through Auckland. And if you look as far as that cargo component, a freighter has about 60 to 100 tons of freight, whereas depending on aircraft type, you'll have 10 to 20 tons in a passenger aircraft. Now that's really important when you consider the geographic location, which we were referring to before, and that element of saying actually that fits naturally. Very difficult for freighters often to want to deploy their assets down to New Zealand because we are what's known as long skinny routes, as opposed to their ability to go east-west, for example, between China, US, and Europe, etc. And then one last number, if you'll bear with me, but there is a method to my madness. And the other is when you look at then tourism or airlines saying, why would we consider putting flights on? Research between China and South America is saying there is about just under 800 passengers per day each way. Now that's a really important number because that tells you going, well, in terms of filling your aircraft, now that's different ways people are currently going between those 2 destinations, but it's saying there's a viable market. And that's broken up from, you've got Brazil, you've got Chile, Argentina, etc. But that's saying that's a viable, there's relevance there in terms of how we think about it. So I pull that together to say, you've got the tourism component and that follow through, you've got the cargo element that's flowing through and how you might make that work together. And then the view is saying, how do you pull all of those components together to offer a proposition that New Zealand can provide something that potentially can't get elsewhere across travel, trade, and tourism. And then in regards to can we do it, which I think is actually what your original question was, we manage through transit facilities now, and whether that be the Sydney, Auckland, New York service, whether it be the Sydney, Auckland, Santiago service. So the airport's well set up for that already and the ability to do that. We've invested in recently upgrading the international to international transfer. We've got a cargo precinct that's under development and looking to be kind of 2027-ish in regards to the growth and part of the master plan. So the makings are there, but I think it does require a number of audiences to come together to give it legs, so to speak.
Thanks, Carrie. Back to you, Alistair. In the report that you commissioned, it does pick up this point that the idea puts New Zealand at the centre of a global value chain as opposed to usually being at the end, which I think is what Carrie's talking about. Usually we're on the long, skinny routes. Can you just explain a bit more, because there's a lot of implication around what it means to be in the centre of a global value chain?
Sure. Well, again, I think it comes down to convenience and advantage for New Zealand companies. So companies in this room that are looking to freight by air their products in multiple directions, and you want certainty of service and you want regular service. And so if we're at the end of a long global route, the long skinny route as Carrie described it, then there's a certain vulnerability that we could be left off at any stage, and us as a market by ourselves is probably not feasible for a lot of these services to continue. So if we're in the middle of things, then that's really locking in our relevance. You can't ignore us anymore, and those Facebook sites that delight in showing maps of New Zealand or maps of the world where New Zealand's not there will be a thing of the past, because we're right in the centre.
Yeah. So, Carrie, just back to you. You picked up about the transit and well set up, but typically what else is required to make something like this happen? Why couldn't it happen next month or probably in 6 months' time? What are the considerations?
Well, a number of things need to come together, and one would be, do you have the facilities to do it? So can we manage international transits now? Yes, you can. I think ultimately the e-commerce question comes to saying, well, actually, whether you need bonded warehousing, or you might need other things, which then certainly you get into government and regulation. But again, from a physical assets perspective, the airport has capacity, warehouses, purpose, design and build warehouses is something the airport is very well experienced at. You've got EBOS, you've got foodstuffs, we're building IKEA now, so that would be something you'd have to consider, and that's not normally a 5-minute job. So from the e-commerce side, you would need to do that. Really important then is an airline. So it's appealing to an airline, the view that as they think about those routes, why would they fly from China to Auckland and potentially Auckland to South America? Is that one airline? Is it two? Airlines are going to be looking to say, well, actually, have we got bi-directional demand? You're not going to have a $250 million asset in a 787 that you're going to have full one way and empty the other. So you do need kind of above the wing, which is the passenger and the tourism element. You need below the wing, which is the freight and the element that goes with it, and that those things come together. So again, you would want the the role of how do you present the business case to appeal to those parties that would be looking for those opportunities. Starts with airlines, then you get into a lot of the other suppliers. But those are all the makings, and like I said, that's why I shared the data before. There's some data points there I think that are incredibly interesting, but it is, you need to get the multiple parties across that value chain lined up saying, to Alistair's point, New Zealand potentially offers something, particularly if you look at southern China or Asia into South America. You've got Guangzhou, Shanghai, Beijing. You've got some massive markets there that point to something
For sure.
worth exploring.
Yeah. And Alistair, what about from a government, I know you're not government, but funded by government, what are the government considerations? Surely people transiting, there must be immigration, there must be customs and all those sorts of things?
Sure. Well, one of the conclusions of our report was that actually the regulatory environment here is flexible and open, and in discussions we've had over the years, one consistent point from government has been, tell us what's needed, bring us the model and the proposition, and we'll try to respond. There are certainly a couple of areas where some regulatory change would be required. One is this idea that still for Chinese passport holders, to transit New Zealand, you need a transit visa. So even if you're not leaving the International Transit Lounge on your way from China to Latin America, you still need to apply for a lengthy and costly visa. So that's a disincentive for travellers and for airlines. Also, the concept of New Zealand being a hub, like a bonded warehouse model where you could warehouse large quantities of goods and then dispatch them in response to fulfillment orders. Piecemeal clashes with the idea at the moment that goods that come into New Zealand physically must cross the border within 28 days in one consignment, and you pay GST at that time. So trying to free up that idea that goods could be physically here but able to be re-exported after a month, that would be another area. But as I say, in general terms, I think we've got a fairly welcoming policy environment.
Sure. And I guess we're talking about China today, obviously, at the China Business Summit, but there is also huge potential from India, from Japan, from other Southeast Asian countries, right, to use Auckland or New Zealand as the hub.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So again, depending on the maps and the line, in some cases, Europe may still be the fastest route or the shortest route. But again, that's not the whole picture. It's, as we were discussing the other day, it's more than just distance. It's the rest of the environment that we can offer as well.
So what are the next steps?
Well, our report concluded in 2021 that really NZIER presented the value proposition. They estimated that potential impact on the New Zealand economy could be close to $2 billion over the next 10 years. But the challenge was it's over to business now. So in other words, you have to assemble that consortium of interests that Carrie referred to and start developing the business case and then presenting that to government and getting the building blocks in place. I don't think there's anything fatally preventing that starting tomorrow. It's just having that coalition of the willing to get things going.
Great. Well, let's change tack for a moment and head to the New Zealand International Convention Centre. And I was sitting at our office in 2019 and looking out over TVNZ to the Sky City and seeing this plume of smoke. And it was a dreadful day, wasn't it, for a lot of people. However, next year, middle of next year, I believe, the New Zealand International Convention Centre will open. It will be a game changer for the business event sector in New Zealand, and the city will now be in the market for attracting large conferences that we've never been able to have before. Just in terms of some numbers, the centre is massive, 32,500 square metres, over 4 levels. The exhibition space alone is the size of Eden Park rugby field. It's a $750 million development, including car parks, about 1,300 of them, I believe, hotel and retail offerings. And it has capacity for 4,000 people for one-off events, but generally targeting those conferences of around 3,000 people. So this really does take us into the market of new people coming at different times of the year. And how, I think the question that was put to this group was, how is New Zealand mining the lucrative Chinese business traveller market as the convention centre prepares to open in 2025? So Lisa, just back to you, because you mentioned it earlier on. What does it mean for your business? What do you see as what are you trying to do to leverage that opportunity right now?
Well, I remember that when you mentioned about the convention center, because in 2018 we've been discussed with the team of the convention center. See, the planning for the first event will be held once this opened in 2019, because that was the year of China-New Zealand tourism. And well, unfortunately, that didn't happen, and it's been dragged for so long. And we already have a Christchurch Convention Center, Wellington Convention Center, but hopefully, because like the size you mentioned, that will be catching up. And the last year, I probably some of you have heard that midway has signed about 10,000 incentive. Travelers to New Zealand. We handled the North Island, which actually mainly in Auckland. They stayed in Auckland for five nights between 13 to 29 of October for 16 days. We received 4,700 incentive visitors, and they had 10 gala dinners and 3 full-day workshops. I wish we had the convention center at that time facilitating all those, but yeah, well, they actually stayed, the incentive group from China tended to be quite demanding, but they upmarket. They actually stayed all the 5-star hotels in Auckland, and they actually tried all of our gourmet food like Onslow and Origin, all those the restaurants.
Convita, Andy's Convita.
Yes, and absolutely. Yeah, and also they do the day trip to Rotorua, and they do Waiheke Island. So the economy, the impact on our local economy was absolutely substantial. So also the impact of this, because the size, and they actually make a great impact on the incentive market in China. So we certainly received quite a few inquiries since departure of the group. And this year in September, which is our low season, and we got another 350, and just doing the exactly same thing in Auckland, which we're really happy with, yeah. And we certainly looking forward to having more for the next year, especially after our convention centers open.
Great. So just to reiterate those numbers, Amway brought in 10,000 to New Zealand last year on incentive travel. That's massive, and 4,700 to Auckland. Yeah, very good. So that must make you smile, Les, because you've got Sudima Hotel, right, strategically located across the road from the convention centre. What does it mean for you?
Well, I should say it was our crane operator building our hotel that first spotted the fire. So
Yes.
I'm not sure whether he's a hero or not. We have long awaited the opening of that convention centre. The whole of Auckland has. What's transpired in the 4 or 5 years is that all the major hotel brands in the world now are represented in Auckland. So we've got great infrastructure, we've got a fantastic airport, and we are ready. I was recently with DT and Miles and Susanna and David with the Prime Minister in Southeast Asia. What we learnt through that trip was that a great number of people out of Southeast Asia, and I'm sure it's the case of China, people had been to New Zealand as travellers, were businessmen and women now, were very successful. They think of New Zealand favourably, and I believe there's an opportunity now with the convention centre for us to get those people back. New Zealand and Auckland particularly needs to be known as a place to do business. Come here, meet here. I picked up the Dr. Wang's presentation earlier. He mentioned, I think, RCP conference, if I got that right. He'd love to have that here. Well, we need to grasp those sort of opportunities. Someone in the room needs to be tackling him and saying, how do we write you a cheque to get here? And I know the Mayor's very keen to write a cheque to support those type of events. So we need to activate, to get ready. We have never had this opportunity. As New Zealanders, we've never had that ability to attract high-level Chinese delegations. We have to remember we lost APEC, and that was the centrepiece for that. And look, I don't know if it's been said, because I haven't been here all morning. Fortunately, I missed the Prime Minister's speech. Chinese visitors are welcome. You are welcome, you are welcome, you are welcome. And there is a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit of laziness on our part of tourism operators where we're kind of expecting the tourism market from China just to recover by itself. And a warning I would have for everybody in the room is that Chinese consumers, and we've learnt that today, they're feeling pressure at home. They have choices. And one of those choices, for instance, is visas. Even recently, China has signed unilateral agreements with many more countries in Europe where you can visit visa-free. For instance, Thailand has opened up. The Chinese travellers going there in vast numbers, and we're at risk of being overlooked. So we, again, you're all welcome. We want Chinese visitors to be welcome, and we've got to work together, especially industry, to lead that. We can't rely on local government and government to fund these things. So I think the challenge for us is to get into the market and build relationships. And I just want to say one thing. When we were in with the Prime Minister, and Fran will support me with this, we were told of a Chinese saying, and it's called 3 cups of tea. And it resonates with New Zealanders. If you want to do business with Chinese people, the saying goes, and I'm happy to be corrected, that the first cup of tea you have to become friends, second cup of tea to become good friends, and the third cup of tea to become lifelong friends. And I think that's a challenge for New Zealand, is we've got to get back into market, back into China, continue to build those relationships, because I think geopolitically that really helps us as well. It gives us that strength of independence.
Yeah, great. 3 cups of tea for sure. And as many of these people know, it takes probably about 33, and you're getting there, that's right. All works out in the end. Carrie, is Auckland Airport ready for thousands of conference attendees to come through your doors? And what, if anything, is Auckland Airport doing to target the Chinese market?
Yeah, thank you. If I can go back to my earlier point around the building blocks. So again, if we look 2019 to 2024, Auckland has 23% more hotels than it did in 2019. A number of 5-star hotels have opened. So we've got great foundational building blocks to be able to move into that space. Lisa had made the comment about the MOU that we'd signed with China Southern and Tātaki, Auckland Unlimited, around the view of saying, how do we tap into and build this market? Of the 210,000 travellers that have returned since borders reopened, Chinese travellers, 6%, 13,000 are business travellers. So there's tremendous opportunity, but we have collective work to do to say, how are we appealing to building that business event market? So we got the great building blocks. I'll come back to that common theme. Then it's how and what do we do to attract them? And you've given some examples. We are working on that in terms of partnering with the likes of China Southern. And then you get to what is Auckland Airport doing then from an infrastructure perspective, as I say, the ability to manage international capacity now in transit. But we are investing for the future You may or may not have heard of the program of work underway at the airport, but we're investing in the ability, if you look at things like the Western Airfield, 250,000 square metres, that's the equivalent of 23 rugby fields, of apron and reticulated gates, which means you can have A380 weight capable aircraft that can come and park for a period of time, particularly long haul. That facilitates the future master plan to say as growth continues that sets up that Pier B, which is where the gates, if you're going international, you hang a right. The ability for that to be expanded to the north. Ultimately, again, depending on growth, a second runway. So there's master plan alignment that says not only what we need to do today, all the building blocks are there, but I do go back and I think that consortium of the right parties together to say we actually need to come together if we want to explore the opportunities that are sitting in front of us.
Thank you, Carrie. There's a few questions coming in on Slido. Good to see that you're still sending in the questions at this time of the day. Let's just put this to the panel. If you could invest $100 million to attract more visitors from China, looking at you here, I think, Alistair, as a general question. And then we'll go to the tourism people. Oh, it's just gone. I think it's saying if you had $100 million, oh, there we go. Where would you invest that money for the biggest return?
Is it seriously for me?
It's seriously for
Okay.
you. Yeah, put on your tourism hat.
I would ask Lisa what to do.
Yeah, we'll come to her next.
So, yeah, look, I think some of the same strategies probably apply to the China market for services, such as tourism, as they do for goods. The social media, the key opinion leaders, the live streams, that kind of thing. Just raising New Zealand's profile, I think, would be a huge help at the China end. I honestly would pass to far more experienced people on the panel than me to talk about visitor attraction, but that would be a great start. I think New Zealand's known, but maybe not as well known as it might be.
I think I could add to that $100 million, if you're in the room, we need to talk. But separately, an investment in events and activities, sports or cultural events, we know that at a minimum, for every dollar invested in an event, we get a $10 return in the tourism and the economic landscape. So, presently, with somewhat of a gap in major events, especially in Auckland for the next 2 or 3 years, investment in those things is a little bit of a no-brainer. That's the simple answer.
Yeah, I'd go that all the way. Events, conferences, promotion. 100 million is about what Tourism New Zealand has to promote the country, so double their budget, I think is what it's saying. This is a great one, though, in your wheelhouse, Alistair, around, and it's something I was very curious too, we've got to be thinking about the competition. So where's the competition coming from for other stopovers? And the report does talk about Australia, and we do talk about things for a long time, and then they may slip away. So what's your view on how do we deal with competition, and do we consider somewhere like Australia as competition to this hub idea?
Sure. Well, coming from Christchurch, I'd be very diplomatic, but there is competition within New Zealand even between our international airports. But no, certainly Australia is also looking at this, and so there are proposals afoot for Australia to be used in the same way. I mean, at the moment, a lot of those air connections between China and Latin America are going through ports like Madrid, for example. So I think what do we need to do to stave that off and to win the business? I think firstly, a whole-of-country approach would be really useful. So I don't know if it was raised when the Prime Minister and delegation went recently to Southeast Asia, but having that on high repeat when the PM or ministers are travelling and raising that with their counterparts and just getting this awareness, because I think at first glance they will not be considering New Zealand as that pivotal hub that we are trying to promote. And then I think beyond that, as we've said several times, just amassing that team that can take a whole of New Zealand approach to getting it up and running. Because once you prove the concept has actually been proved. During the COVID period, there started to be sort of urgent shipments, air shipments of PPE going from China through to Latin America, and Auckland was chosen as the hub for those. So, you know, you've had proof of concept, but I think you need to start somewhere and start to build the momentum, and then I think it'll flow from there. And that's probably doing rather than talking, as someone said, is probably the best way to stave off the other competition.
Get on with it, yeah. There's another, oh, go, Carrie.
Sorry, I
yeah.
just wanted to add to that. I think, again, it's the combination of all the things we've talked about. So the competition will be what's the best proposition, and it will be for airlines and how they're flying, whether it be most direct, most efficient, how they get the best loads. It will be the visas and the processing. It will be all of those things. So it's kind of who's going to front up ultimately is going to decide the competition. I think you look, if you want to say this part of the world, you have really Australia or New Zealand. It's not going to be both. If you, again, I like my numbers, you've probably gathered by now, but if you look, I asked the team to give me what is the one stop between China and South America at the moment. 60% are one stop, 37% are two stop, and then you've got multi above that. Of that 60%, 46% are through Paris, 40% is through Houston. You then get into Vancouver, LA, et cetera, and you've got a long tail after that. But so you know, again, the data shows you where things are currently happening, and so you start to take a look at it to say, well, what would have to be true for it to become a unique proposition that will have an appeal ultimately?
Fascinating stats, thank you. Here's another beauty question, which I think is Paul Morgan. And, you know, the report, Alistair, talks about e-commerce being 55-60% of the value. What Paul's asking here is, you know, what industries will be filling those airplane bellies, as Carrie talked about? Because, and also having to have that full, the cargo full both ways. What kind of product are we talking about?
Sure. Well, when the report was done in 2021, and I'm sure it's probably even stronger proposition now, it was e-commerce packages that were really identified as the primary goods that could be transferred in both directions. So obviously, those of us who know Alibaba and Temu and Shein know the sheer size of the cargo that is travelling by air in response to fulfillment orders, but increasingly Latin America, and again, I have to say New Zealand companies as well, are also responding to fulfillment orders. And so that's one major area. Another area would be the primary produce that we transfer in both directions by air as well. You know, your live seafood, cherries during season, the goods that makes commercial sense to send by plane. So we heard anecdotally of a company from South America, a seafood company, that wanted to establish their distribution centre in Auckland, and were at least doing a feasibility study because they could see that this was halfway towards their target market in China. And so if they could dispatch from here, much as our companies do, then that would be beneficial for them. I don't think, by the way, that means we're encouraging competition, that those companies are going to drive ours out of the market. They're often different products, but it's the same overnight mentality.
Great. Look, this panel has all been about opportunities, the opportunities to grow trade and travel through increased air connections, taking advantage of our geographic location in a way that we've not really put into place or thought more deeply about in the past. So just from all of today, one final word from each of you, thinking about the opportunity with China. What have you taken out of today as a key opportunity that you're going to take back tomorrow and think, yes, this is China, New Zealand, it's looking good, I'm excited about the future? If we start with you, Lisa.
Well, I'm still wanted to add something for our panel for today, talking about the Southern Link, because I feel this is such a timely topic, especially nowadays we become the tourism industry. I think everyone's happy with the rebound. And however, when we become a more and more expensive destination, and are we able to keep this momentum and keep our growth sustainable? And we certainly like to looking for the new ideas, new options, and like our Prime Minister encouraged us forward thinking. I thought the Southern Link was such a bold initiative, and I think we should keep up this going and also make something probably reality, like I said, compete with our Aussie neighbor, and to actually bring those additional traffic for the tourism, the cultural people. I understand the South American people are very, South America offer a lot of cultural tourism, which actually our New Zealand is strong with our unique culture. So I think a lot of itineraries we can put up and a lot of offerings we could actually for the tourism industry's growth.
Well said, well said. Carrie, what's the opportunity from your perspective that you've seen today and through this panel?
Well, very much the discussion of bringing the requisite parts together to explore and in fact to bring this to life. And I think that the role of Auckland Airport is the enabling infrastructure, some of the knowledge. The boots on the ground was a phrase we heard a lot play out today. We've had boots on the ground in China from pre-COVID, so we've got knowledge and expertise in market, as well as kind of understanding in what we can assist all the parties to say what would have to be true for that to happen from an airport's perspective, and we are certainly willing and ready to help.
Fantastic, thank you. Alistair?
Yeah, I think going back to what the Prime Minister said this morning, that this is all about China, and when we're talking about doubling export growth, it's not closing one door and opening another, it's trying every possible door. And I think in that context, something like the Southern Link is the perfect example of how you can start to draw linkages across multiple trading partners and contribute to the diversification drive, but also contribute to the doubling exports goal as well. So in a way, there's not much you have to do to activate it, really. It could be a low-hanging fruit or an early win to really start to kickstart what we want to do in future.
Thank you. And over to you, Les.
I would ask our politicians just to be very careful moving forward around the tone and the language in relation to geopolitical things. New Zealand has an opportunity to build a stronger reputation for itself, especially in China and Southeast Asia, through food security and then through tourism and trade. And with the right approach, we can create some independence for ourselves and maybe for the first time become important to those partners, whereas at the moment we're kind of on the periphery.
Well said. Well, look, Mayor Wayne Brown's here. I know he's keen to talk to anyone who's interested in his views on the Southern Cross, and we've got other people from government and with other views, so I hope that you get a chance to have a chat at the end of the session. I really loved what Jason Bloom said from Les Mills in the last session, that pessimists usually are correct, but optimists will prevail. So all for the future of the Southern Link, and thank you very much to our panel. Let's give them a great round of applause.